that's a kind of a common trope that you hear among the oneness. Well, the word Trinity is in the Bible. So, I call this an example of the exact words fallacy.
Why we don't see the word Trinity in the Bible, because that's another objection I get often from, Hebrew Israelites, oneness people, all different types of folks who don't agree with orthodoxy. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a common trope that you hear among the oneness. Well, the word Trinity is in the Bible. So, I call this an example of the exact words fallacy, that unless a word appears in a verse of scripture, in a sentence or in a statement, in that exact way, in that exact unmistakable way, in that exact unmistakable word order even, then it is not biblical. And the first problem with that logically is that if that is true, then we've got to throw out things like incarnation, right? Because incarnation as a theology developed somewhere around, I think, the 3rd or 4th century. That doesn't mean the concept of the incarnation is not already biblical. I mean, the Bible used numerous words for it. And the word became flesh, that word gonado, is the idea of becoming something, right? Well, that speaks to the incarnation, right? God sent his son. Galatians 4:4. The fullness of time, God sent forth his son, made of a woman. Boy, that speaks to the incarnation. The word became flesh, and all of these different verses. Paul says, great is the mystery of godliness. God was, it says he was manifested in the flesh. And the word there that he uses for manifested refers to the, obviously to the incarnation. Yet the word incarnation is not a biblical word. The word incarnation, however, was in use during the time of the production and the writing of the New Testament. But, in the Greek world, as it relates to mythology, an incarnation, which means to be enfleshed, was the idea of a God literally becoming a man. But in becoming a man, he would be essentially transmogrified. He would become something other than what he was. And then that was it. So he was no longer a God. He was a God who became a man. And so obviously the more Greek mythological sense of incarnation would not be what the New Testament writers had in mind. Later, in the early church, they saw usefulness to the word incarnation. But what meaning did they pour into it? Well, all of the conceptualization that you see in the New Testament. And that is the idea of the Son eternally existing, pre-existing with the Father, becoming, taking on a human existence, but not ceasing to be God, right? And so with incarnation theology, they had to be able to explain things like the dual nature of Jesus, the hypostatic union, and then you've got things like the communicado idiomatum, or the communication of properties. Well, how did these two natures in the one person actually work in any given situation? And so that's what that would explain. But all that is the result of incarnation theology. Nobody would argue that the doctrine of the incarnation was not invented until the 3rd and 4th century, because it's all conceptually biblical, right? So further, words like omnipotence, omnipresence, and even omniscience, those are not biblical words either. However, they are conceptually biblical. Would anybody argue here that God's not all powerful? No. And yet the word, somebody even said, but it is, it's right here in the King James. And I'm like, the word that was used by John was not omnipotent. That's the translation, right? So again, omnipotent is not a biblical word. And when we say biblical word, we're talking about words that actually appear in the original languages of Scripture. So no, omnipotent is not a biblical word in that sense. Yet the conceptualization of being all powerful, almighty is biblical. So, you know, this is a very, this is what you would call a logical fallacy, this whole notion. I mean, if that were true, then there's nowhere that Jesus ever said in this exact way, my name is Jesus, or I am God, or I am the Messiah. And yet he did make very indirect statements making those same claims, but not in that exact way, word order or phraseology, right? So to say that the word Trinity is not in the word Bible is not in the Bible. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, Jadakiss, like, what are we doing here? What are we really doing? Right. So it's a really ignorant argument.
Yeah, I find people being real inconsistent when they use that, because like you said, the word Bible isn't in the Bible, and all these other words, Christophany, theophany. It's like, okay, you got to throw away a lot of sound doctrine if you're going to say, well, this word isn't in there, and so therefore the doctrine isn't in there. It just
right
doesn't quite work.